Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the Renaissance. Now, it's important to know that a lot of these historical time periods that we're covering, including what we just did with the Age of Exploration prior, really go hand in hand and overlap with one another. So the years of the Age of Exploration, some of it actually overlaps with what we're going to say is the years of the Renaissance, which is anywhere between 1350 to about 1550 or 1600. Again, scholars are always going to debate on some of these different ages, especially in things like the Renaissance, which we'll discuss in a moment. Now, you need to know that things overlap, because even when we discuss the scientific revolution, and even when we discuss the Reformation, those things take place roughly around the same years as the Renaissance. But why do we study the Renaissance and not just call it one big thing? Well, it's easier to focus on themes. So when we discuss the Renaissance, we're not even going to get into all the scientific stuff that's going on at the same time. We're going to be focusing mainly on the Italian Renaissance, which for the most part started in Florence and made its way throughout Italy, and we'll discuss why. But we're not going to focus on the different theories of the Earth, of whether or not the sun revolves around it, or if the Earth is the center of everything, because that we're going to discuss when we talk about the scientific revolution in another video series. So again, we're just dealing with these different types of themes, kind of putting history in a box so that we can unpack it and really study it as best we can. It's not always going to be pretty, it's not always going to be the best way to study history, but it is one way, especially when we do brief overviews like we are here. So, the Renaissance. Now, what is it? Literally, the term means rebirth. So, what is it a rebirth of? It obviously begs the question. If you say Renaissance means rebirth, rebirth of what? Rebirth of classical studies. Now, what in the world does that mean? It means the Greek and Roman studies from hundreds of years ago, before the fall of the Roman Empire, before the fall of Rome, and then even before the medieval period, the Dark Ages happened, you had Greek and Roman culture. And obviously, when you're dealing with Roman, you're also dealing with Rome, which is in Italy. So that's why Italy is more connected than other places in Europe at this time. Because think about it, they're living in a place that is surrounded by history, that basically knocks at their door every single day and says,
remember me, 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 remember me.
But why did people in Italy want to remember the Greek and Roman past? Why now? Why during the 1300s all the way up into the 1600s were people trying to bring back these classical studies, to start learning Greek again and interpreting it and reading it, and to start reading Roman mythology and Greek mythology and dealing with the art of that time period and the literature of that time period, the politics of that time period, the economics of that time period? Why the Black Death? Or the bubonic plague. The plague really just came in like a wrecking ball.
I came in like a wrecking ball.
Really just came in like a wrecking ball and
I came in like a wrecking ball.
destroyed everything. It was a huge travesty and a huge tragedy throughout Europe and even into Russia. But how did that happen? Well, the plague was spread from fleas on rats that were being transferred over through the trade routes, the newly established trade routes that we discussed during the Age of Exploration. So it was really these new trade routes that led, inadvertently, to the bubonic plague, and the bubonic plague led inadvertently to the Renaissance. Now, are there other factors? Certainly, but I definitely believe that the bubonic plague, the Black Death as it was called, was one of the primary factors of the Renaissance because it turned their life upside down. People saw the majority of their family wiped out. People in their cities and towns just were dying one after another. It was a huge problem during the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, and there's a reason why they call it the Dark Ages. Now you also have the Crusades going on as well, but then the Black Death really just attacks everybody, and it doesn't care if you're rich or poor or part of the church. It killed everybody. It was not discriminatory. It didn't care who you were, what you were doing, or what your status in life was. It would kill you without a question. And it did exactly that. And it rocked Italy specifically to its core. It messed up with their politics because you have leaders dying left and right. It weakened the Roman Catholic Church because, again, a lot of high up officials in the church are now dying even though they just got done with the Crusades. So this is planting different seeds in people's minds like, we don't want this anymore. We need to get past this. Life was so much better for people in the old days, before these problems. And thus you could tell how this thinking starts infiltrating their minds and they start craving the olden days, the classical studies. And so they start studying it. And in the same time, because of the Black Death, you also have economic class systems completely changing, kind of. They were dealing with the feudal system, and for the most part, a lot of Italy still kept that, but it starts changing slightly, mainly because of the labor force. Now, just imagine, you're living in Italy during the Black Death, the bubonic plague. A lot of people die. Hundreds of thousands of people are dead. All those people had jobs. All those people had different things that they had to do, and now they're gone. You now have a very low supply of people who can work. And when you have a low supply of something, it typically costs more. So let's say that you were to survive the Black Death, even though a lot of other people around you died. Now you're one of the only workers who can do your job because there's no more competition because they all died. Now let me ask you a question. Are you going to get paid more for doing that job or less? And the answer is more, because there's less of you who can do that job. And because of this, in Italy, you now have a lot of people making more money than they were previously making.
I'm really rich.
Now, that's not to say that there wasn't poverty. There was. That's not to say that there wasn't a drastic recovery period from the Black Death, because there was. But it is to say that it drastically changed their economic system. And when you have more money in your pocket, you tend to spend it on extras. After you're done paying for your food and your rent, your cost of living, you then can go out and buy some toys. You can go out and buy things that maybe aren't necessary for your survival, but definitely increase your happiness. And in walks the Renaissance. You have some people with more money. You have some people going back to the Greek and Roman past of studying it. And now these people with more money are saying, hey, I want to be a patron. Meaning, I want to finance and give money, pay somebody to make beautiful art for me. Or for this school. Or for this place in the government. And so people, specifically like the Medici family in Florence, who became really wealthy bankers, they started going out and they would take their money and say, here, Michelangelo, I would love for you to paint this. I'd love for you to make a statue. Just go and do your art. Again, it's not necessary for a person's survival, but when you have extra money in your pocket, you're able to spend it on those extra things. And so the Renaissance is really known for its prolific artwork. within churches, within chapels, within governments, just regular paintings that are around. And some of the most well-known artists that we even know of today and go to museums to see their work came about during the Renaissance. People like Michelangelo, people like Leonardo da Vinci, people like Raphael, people like Titan. A lot of these people, the Mona Lisa was painted during this time period. The School of Athens painting was painted during this time period. The different statues of David were built and constructed during this time period. And so you have this drastic overhaul of an economic system, and because of the Black Plague, it allows for this Renaissance to begin and this Renaissance to happen, this rebirth of the olden days, if you will, of Greek and Roman studies, of humanism, of focusing on humans and their potential, of not just focusing on the church. Very important to know. Those are kind of the key concepts of the Renaissance. It's a very brief overview, I know, but hopefully you learned something. Go ahead, read in your study packets of some of those people and some of those paintings and some of the key terms, and you're going to do just fine.